Shalom. Welcome. I'm Rabbi Scott with Beth, Yeshua, Messianic Synagogue in Fort Myers, Florida. Welcome to our midweek Torah study. This is the time when we have a study on the current Torah portion, the Parsha. This week's Parsha is Devarim. We are starting Devarim. We are starting Deuteronomy. So just wanted to say a few words of welcome to you. Just a reminder that we also have our Shabbat services online Saturday mornings at 11 a.m. They are live streamed and then they are recorded on this YouTube channel for you to enjoy as you like. And then we also have our midweek teaching on the Revelation series with Rabbi Jim Pickens, who is teaching the Revelation series. That's one we have just re-released and have begun at the beginning. About almost a couple of years worth of messages there. So we've just started that, and so just encourage you to consider those things on this teaching ministry. And thank you for all of your support, for your prayers and well wishes. If you would like to dialogue on this teaching, by all means, please reach out to us and contact us, and we look forward to hearing from you. Okay, without any delay, let's go ahead and get started tonight. We are in Devarim, which is Deuteronomy. The Parsha is Devarim, the namesake. Devarim, Hebrew for words. These are the words. We'll begin with a summary. It's a pretty straightforward Parsha to begin with. The first day of the 11th month of the 40th year, Moshe spoke to the children of Israel from the far side of the Yarden, the far side of the Jordan. It's an 11-day journey from Horeb, that is Mount Sinai, to Kadesh Barnea. It took them 40 years to travel 11 days, to travel this 11-day journey because of the years they wandered in the wilderness. And Moses recounts here in the Parsha the narrative of leaving Horeb, the Sinai wasteland. It's called Mount Sinai. It's also called Mount Horeb. Sinai is the name of the wasteland, the wilderness, the wilderness of Sinai. And so the mountain there, Mount Horeb, is called the mountain of Sinai. So it's called Mount Sinai, but it's also called Mount Horeb. And in the text here we have, and this is of course Deuteronomy chapter 1 through chapter 3, 22. Moses is establishing leaders, breaking them down into thousands and hundreds and fifties and tens. Talks about how he commissioned judges, and then we go into the narrative of sending out spies before entering the land. One spy, of course, from each tribe. They brought back word that the land was good, but the people became afraid because they were given information that the land, the people of the land, the inhabitants were frightening and terrifying. So I'm just going to turn this down just a little bit here. And so because of that, the people refused to go into the land, and Adonai's anger burned against them, and they were forced to wander in the wilderness until that entire generation had died out. Moses encouraged them that that Adonai would fight for them, and yet they did not trust Adonai. And so Adonai insisted that not one of these people would enter his rest, except for Caleb, and Yehoshua and Joshua. Moses will also not enter the land, but he does this for a different reason, because he violated the trust of Adonai, and instead of speaking to the rock as he was told, he struck the rock with a stick and the water came out. So Moses is not going to go into the land because Adonai was angry with him for this. Continuing on, Moses recounts the travels and the wanderings, 38 years from the time that they left Horeb until that entire generation had died out. And then Adonai has Moses do this. Adonai has Moses take vengeance on the enemies of Israel and of Adonai against the Amori, against Sihon, king king of Heshbon, and Og, king of Bashan. there's an exchange here where Moses is going to take vengeance on these enemies per Adonai's instructions. Except the people of Esau, the descendants of Esau who were living in Seir, and the people of Lot, the descendants of Lot, through Moab, his firstborn, who were called the Moabites, who were living in Ar. They were not subject to the wrath or the vengeance of Moses or the people of Israel or Adonai. And but it's interesting that Adonai does instruct Moses to take vengeance as a final act prior to the passing of Moses. And we finish with this, to Joshua. He says, "Your eyes have seen everything that Adonai your God has done to these two kings," speaking back again of Sichon and Og. "Adonai will do the same to all the kingdoms you encounter when you cross over. Don't be afraid of them, because Adonai your God will fight on your behalf." We see the parsha ending this way, encouraging Joshua in Joshua's conquest of Canaan and leading the people in. And so goes a simple, quick 2-minute summary of the parsha. This week at Beth Yeshua, we have a bar mitzvah service. And the way we're doing this bar mitzvah service, as we do most of our bar mitzvah services, the bar mitzvah is going to actually teach the lesson, the message. He's going to actually give the message this week in the service. And so I do not have to preach this week. So I get a kind of a week off. As such, I don't have to prepare a message. So I think I want to do something a little different in our Torah services, or our Torah study this week. I want to take it a little bit of a different direction. What I'd like to do is discuss with you this Moses, and discuss with you a change in the work of Moses. The moment that judgment against this generation, the generation of the spies, the moment that judgment is handed down, the preparations for that generation ended. They changed. They went into a different phase, and it becomes all about the next generation. Imagine if you had a business, and it was announced that after a certain period of time, this business was going to be handed over to the next generation. Period. And at that moment, as soon as that succession plan is defined, everything becomes about that next generation. We think of it in terms of the gradual dying out of that generation as being the best visual aid. In other words, as the people as the older generation is dying out, and the younger generation is alive to see the older generation dying out, you would think that might be a good visual aid. Obey Adonai so you don't end up like them, dying in the desert. But I submit to you that teaching strategy may not be all that effective, in a sense that obedience and trust must be taught. You get a sense of that here in the book of Devarim, that Moses is trying to teach trust of Adonai. Now, Deuteronomy means second, or dual, or two. Nomos, law. Second reading of the law, second telling of the law is kind of the literal translation of the word Deuteronomy. But in Hebrew, the title of the book is Devarim, which is words. Let that sink in for a moment. Words. The name of the book is Words. What do we know of our president, our president Donald Trump? What do we know about him? If you had, say you had been born right when he took office, and you had grown up with him, what would you know about him? Well, you would know about him because of his images and representations that are in society. Donald Trump is a known entity in society because we see him on the screens of our televisions and computers and phones. We are very much image, optics, visual-based society. because of the prolific nature of media, first in print and then in electronic digital forms. Let me remind you of in 1960, we had a change in how presidential politics were navigated. That was the year of the debate, the first televised debate between JFK and Richard Nixon. At that time, I think Richard Nixon was vice president running for president, and JFK, John F. Kennedy, was a senator running for president. And so they had this presidential debate, and they were on screen. And, you unfortunately, people of my generation, it's difficult to look at Richard Nixon without some measure of scorn. We're very thoroughly propagandized to be negative towards the man, and he may well deserve much of our scorn and contempt. His actions were likely criminal and did force his retirement. So the scorn may be in part at least appropriate, but that's not what I'm talking about here. What I'm talking about is that was the year that the debate between John F. Kennedy and Richard Nixon, the presidential debates, became on screen, and now the debates were less about words and more about image, more about the optics, more about how it appears on the screen. Nixon knew that he had lost the debate to John F. Kennedy. I've read that he walked away knowing that he had just lost the presidency based on that debate, because John F. Kennedy was just much more savvy and adept and comfortable with the camera. And Richard Nixon knew that he did not appear well. And that was the theory at the time, or at least that's what I've read. All right. Incidentally, this is the essence of idolatry. Idolatry is image-based. It is either a sculptured form, or it's a painted form, or it's a representative form. Idolatry is always about a created form. Perhaps it's a living form. For those of you who are familiar with certain pagan idolatries of worship towards plants and trees and the like, or even perhaps rocks and stones that are found in nature, yeah, you have some of these expressions of idolatry. But still, do you see that there is an image, a visage that is being connected to in idolatry? The images in idolatry are frequently distorted representations of what is real and beautiful, distorted representations of the human form, distorted representations of animal forms, and so on. In contrast to all these things, optics and images, in contrast to all those things, what we have here is words. In Judaism, the art of Judaism is not about the form. It's not about a representation of a human form of any kind. The art in Judaism is sometimes geometric and sometimes abstract, but it's never there's never a sense of religious art in the same way that you get in the Western civilizations, Catholic traditions, and Protestant traditions. What we have instead of that is words. And not even words in the form of artistic representations, but we have words in the form of revelation. We have this phrase here at the beginning of Deuteronomy, of Devarim. These are the words that Moses spoke to Israel. Ele hadavarim asher deber Moshe el chol Israel. These are the words that Moses spoke to all of Israel, el chol, all of Israel. Hadevarim dever, the words that were spoken. Hadevarim dever, the spoken words. This is how the book is begun. These are going to be your words that you carry with you. In Yochanan, in the Brit Chadashah, the New Testament, we have the Word becoming flesh. We have Yeshua, the Word become flesh, and tabernacling or dwelling among us, and we beheld His glory. In Hebrew, Vayedaber levash basar ve'yishkon betokenu ve'et kovado The Word became flesh and dwelt among us. We beheld His glory. This dwelt among us. Vayishkon betokenu, became indwelled amongst us. This is what we carry with us. This is the words of Adonai. These words become flesh for us. These words that Moses was transmitting to the people, these words were to go with them, and those words were to be part of them and be part of their experience and part of their expression of their connection with Adonai. This is what Moses was doing, is he was conveying these things to them. We have the iteration of that is Yeshua, the Word become flesh, who said rather than abolish the words, in other words the Torah or the law, rather than abolish the words, the hadaver, rather than abolish that, he fulfilled that. In other words, in a sense, he becomes that. We have these words spoken by the man in the flesh. We say this, these are the words that became flesh for us. For Moses, it was his flesh, the person, the leader, the prophet flesh, that spoke these words. And we have this. We say this every week in our worship. V'zot haTorah asher sa Moshe lifnei bnei Israel. And this is the Torah which Moses placed before the children of Israel. V'zot haTorah. This is the Torah. These are the words. From Devarim, chapter 4, verse 43. And then we follow that. The echo or refrain of that is the Al Pi Adonai B'yad Moshe. It is the word of the Lord by the hand of Moses, from Bamidbar, from Numbers chapter 4. We say this in our service, in our synagogue worship every week, when we see the Torah elevated and the words displayed, and we look up upon this and we point to it and we say, this is the Torah. These are the words. This is the word that was spoken. Hadavarim diver, the spoken words. But the iteration of this again is that these words were spoken by the man of flesh, the Yeshua. The word become flesh. In him the word becomes flesh and speaks among us. And we who are indwelt by the Ruach are to be both words and flesh of Adonai. We don't just we don't have a visage, we don't have an image, we don't have an icon. We have these words, but the words have gone beyond that of merely counsel and wisdom and law and regulation. The words have become something living and breathing, and it becomes even more than just living and breathing. It dwells within us. We who are indwelt by the Ruach, by virtue of our relationship with Yeshua, our acceptance of Yeshua, are to be both words and flesh, in the same way that Yeshua was both the Word and flesh. We are to be the flesh that He dwells within of Adonai. We are His workmanship. We are His construction. We are the container that He invests His Ruach into, and we carry this Ruach to all the world. In the same way that this body carries my spirit and my soul around as we go through life, in the same way, my identity is to be a carrier, a conductor, a conveyance, if you will, because Adonai has invested His Ruach in me, and that goes with me as I go. And yet it's not just Ruach, it's Ruach in these words. Remember, it says this in Yirmiyahu, I'll write this Torah upon their hearts, says Adonai. I will write this Torah upon their heart. I will write these words upon their hearts, says Adonai, meaning that now the word isn't just something in my head that rattles around up here and becomes a statement of judgment, rightly dividing the world with truth. I know that's a misquote of Brit Hadashah New Testament reference, but do you see what I'm saying? We use words to divide. Words are all about division. Remember the creation story, the narrative in Bereshit. The creation story was all about organizing. He created something and then divided it, and divided and divided and divided, and this is what Adonai did. In a sense, we rightly divide the world using words, and we think of words in terms of how we look at the world and how we see the world. We use words to define our world. In the Christian tradition, we have the Trinity, which is a definition of God. We use these words to define God. If you take any systematic theology from the Christian tradition, it is words that define God. And as such, we create these constructs of yeah, it does. It looks like a box. We create these constructs out of words that are somehow representative of Adonai. And yet, the real purpose of the word was to be written upon our hearts. It was to be written not up here to divide the world, but in our hearts to bring compassion and peace to the world. This is a different usage, a different context, a different approach, a different paradigm, if you will. To approaching Adonai in the context of the world. When it says, "I will write this Torah upon their hearts," as Adonai, it's in the context of Israeli revival as well. This is an Israeli approach through the Devarim, the words. So here in Devarim, we have Moses turning a corner to bless the children of Israel. Just a couple more points here, and then I'm going to wrap it up. A little quick tonight, but sometimes it's fun to go long, and sometimes and get deep, and sometimes it's fun to keep it light and brief. So tonight we're going to be a little bit brief, just a couple more points. Here in Devarim, we have Moses turning a corner to bless the children of Israel. Now is when we in the tradition have a change in our understanding of Moses. Moses up until now has been enigmatic, he's been mysterious, he's been the prophet, he's been the one we're afraid of. Now, in the Jewish tradition, what do we call him? We call him Moshe Rabbeinu. He is Moses the teacher. He now becomes a rabbi to us, a teacher. Devarim, the words of the teacher, is what we value. In every case, we value the words of our teachers. To the next generation of Israel, all of us have a favorite teacher. All of us have somebody who said something to us that was meaningful, that perhaps changed our lives, maybe perhaps changed our lives significantly. That's entirely possible. And all of us have had those experiences. So yes, this is what we're talking about here. There is a sense in which Moses actually turns a corner and he becomes Moshe Rabbeinu, the teacher, from the words of the teacher to the next generation. Teachers, leaders must have followers, and followers must have leaders. If you don't have anybody following you, you're not a leader. If you're not following somebody, then you're not a follower. You don't have a leader. There is a sense in which Moses was ineffective with the previous generation. It's like this, and it's like being a parent. In one sense, yeah, you're responsible for everything your children do. And if you don't do good parenting strategies, as all of us will attest, if you don't do good parenting, you will pay for it. Your children will grow up with some struggles, and those struggles will come back to you. I'm sorry, this is something we're probably all familiar with, or at least those of us who have adult children anyway. So if we maybe we found Adonai late in life, or maybe we got ourselves together, maybe we figured ourselves out, maybe we had our own issues we had to figure out before we could be a good parent, and then we became a good parent. But you know that when the damage is done, it's damaging. It is a damage. So in one sense, yeah, being a parent, your children are your responsibility. But let me also suggest to you that they're not entirely your responsibility, that you can be a good parent, you can be the best of parents, and the children still have struggles. In fact, there is a sense in which you can be a great parent, and the children may choose to reject your parenting. All of us have those stories. There's a sense in which Moses was ineffective with the previous generation. There's a sense in which Moses was not going to be able to lead them into the promised land, into the land of conquest. There was a sense in which he was going to fail, and then of course we have the episode where he strikes the rock and he's not even allowed to take the next generation in. And so what could Moses do differently with the second generation than he did with the first? And this is what I submit to you, is Moses becomes Moshe Rabbeinu. It might take some time to develop this. I've taught on this in the past. For some of you who've heard me teach on this, perhaps you can recall. But remember when the people came to Moses and they gathered around him to interpret the law, even before Sinai, even before the tablets, even before the instructions. They were coming to him for the law of God. And that when he was up on the mountain for too long, they crafted a golden calf and they said, look, this is your God who led you out of Egypt. Why did they do this? They did this because Moses was too long up on the mountain. Well, they're surrounded by the smoke, the fire, and the crashing, and the thunder, and so forth. Surely they knew that it wasn't Moses who had led them out of Egypt, but that's the thing of it, is they were clinging to Moses. Moses had become like a golden calf to them. They came to him for everything. He was a father to them. And appreciating that for what it is, they're understanding that these are orphans who had come out of slavery. They needed somebody to glom onto. They needed somebody to hold on to. But Moses was not able to become like a father to them. He wasn't able to become like a teacher to them, because they tested him at every turn and they grumbled about him. So Moses has to turn the corner. He has a next generation. And yet he's not going to go into the land. So what does he leave them with? What can he do here? And we see this, the course of the entirety of the book of Devarim takes place over the course of probably about a month. This is the beginning of Devarim. We see this echoed again at the time between the resurrection of Yeshua and the ascension of Yeshua, where Yeshua was explaining things. He was teaching. He was finalizing the understanding. He was finalizing the revelation. Moses was doing the same thing. Moses was finalizing the revelation. We think of Deuteronomy, Devarim, as a history book. Actually, it's more of a letter. It's in the form of a marital covenant document. The entirety of this appears to be Moses delivering these messages, these vignettes, over the course of 30 days. And then finally, before his ascension, remember Yeshua had his ascension, where Yeshua went up on the mountain and was taken up into heaven. The Talmudim were there staring into the clouds, and the angelic messenger said, what are you looking for? Don't you know that when he comes back, he'll come back in the same way? Do you see the parallel that Moses has his ascension? He goes up onto the mountain alone, attended by angels. The tradition is that he was buried by angels. Moses has the place of a leader, establishing the guard who will succeed him, but we've got this narrow window here where the old has been wiped out, the old generation has been wiped out, everything's about the next generation, and he has this little 30-day window before he goes up onto the mountain. Moses has the place of a leader, establishing the people who will succeed him, but more than this, he is establishing the generational legacy. He is establishing the principle that this is something that is passed down, that is passed on. Later in the book, we get into the curses, the blessings, but the curses are really remarkable. The fear that is laid out in these curses reminds us of the fear that overtook Abraham at the covenant of the parts when Adonai showed him that the people of Israel were going to be enslaved for 400 years with the smoking pot and the fear and the terror that gripped Abraham. We have the same kind of fear and terror that could grip you reading this narrative and designed to hopefully encourage them to not fail to keep the laws and the mitzvot of Adonai. The other thing that Moses has, not only establishing the guard who will succeed him, is he's also going to establish meaning. The meaning of Judaism, the meaning of the law, to be a people of the law. The meaning of Judaism is indeed to be a people of the law. The meaning of the kingdom in Yeshua is to be a people of the Word. The Word is both Torah, it's not exclusive of the law, it's not exclusive of the Torah, but it's also to be under both the Word and which is both under Moses now it was no longer about the collision with Adonai at Sinai. This is not a generation of Sinai. These children now that are going to take over, they didn't have the revelation of Adonai unless they were very young children. For them, their revelation of Adonai is expressed through their daily sacrifices, through keeping the mitzvot and commandments and regulations in the context of the sacrifice and the tabernacle, the worship, keeping the laws of living day in and day out under the cloud and fiery column, of living day in and day out of the manna, not a mountain of smoke and fire and fear, but of the manna and the fire that led the tent, the tabernacle. This is a secret that can't be kept. Then we're all just walking through the desert waiting for this generation to end so we can gather ourselves and enter in. This is the context of Moses' letter to Israel and the kingdom. This is the context of Moses' letter to Israel, that of the desert, waiting for this generation to end so we can gather ourselves together. Today, in the kingdom of Adonai, we have a secret that cannot be kept. So we'll gather here on the eve of entering the promise of eternity. We'll gather ourselves. We will circumcise our hearts, we'll renew our vows, and we will enter into eternity with the captain of the hosts of heaven. Never more in the history has Moses' final words mattered more to the kingdom of Adonai than today to Israel and to the nations. These are the words of Moses. Remember, V'zot HaTorah. This is the law. This is the words. This is what Adonai has given us. That truly providing for us and providing for his salvation through the work of Yeshua, but that revelation being a revelation of words and a revelation of his truth in word form. He was truth made flesh, and he was the Word made flesh, and he was complete in himself. And that's how he could say, I did not come to abolish, but rather to complete or fulfill. This is Devarim, these are the words of Moses. Baruch Hashem. Don't our hearts burn within us for the Mashiach as we turn over these pages, as we study these words? When the Talmudim were on the road to Emmaus and the stranger joined them and began to unpack the scriptures and show the entirety of the scriptures being about him, about Yeshua. And they said this, didn't our hearts burn within us along the way? Well, let me ask you, don't our hearts burn within us for the Mashiach when we study the words of the Torah? The same as they did on the way to Emmaus. Let us eagerly continue to study the scriptures, to show ourselves approved and knowledgeable within the fullness of what he has for us. And our delight is to know him and know his ways so much better and so much more. There is so much wisdom in words the words of Adonai, the words of Proverbs, Mishlei, the words of the Torah. There's so much wisdom there. We get to enter into that wisdom and receive that wisdom. So may you have a good week. Please reach out to us via the email or the comments below. And if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to ask. In the meantime, I just wish you every good gift and every blessing during these days of turmoil and unrest and uncertainty. I just pray that Adonai is very, very close to you. We bless you in the name of Yeshua. Shalom, shalom.